Just over a week ago, there were some RLCS pros in Europe as well as North America that had their opinions actually about the RLCS X format. Primarily, apparently, Jack ended up putting out a tweet talking about the frustrations with how the grid and regionals and everything for the spring split are all pushed together over the course of only 22 days. This ended up starting a conversation between a lot of different pros, expressing their opinions about the frustrations of the scheduling and the short-sightedness of Psyonix, as well as some actually being on the complete opposite side. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down what actually happened, who's talking about what, and actually providing my own thoughts as well. What's up, everybody? Lawler here, your inside source for all things Rocket League. Before we get into everything, obviously, shouts to all of you. Thank you for taking the time to come and watch the videos. If you guys have yet to do so, obviously hit subscribe and turn on notifications. There's still like 50-60% of you that don't. We greatly appreciate bumping that number up. And while you're down there, give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Today's conversation is going to be a fun one. I'm going to be breaking this video down into a couple different parts. First part is actually explaining the situation and what it's come to be, as well as providing a little bit of context to the whole scenario for those that are unaware of the format. They're going to be talking about the different sides and then also kind of expressing my own opinion throughout. Going to be a lot of like reading and reacting to this. So first thing is the actual tweet that was put out by apparently Jack. He says, the fact that the grid is squeezed into 22 days really highlights how unorganized and terrible this whole format is, which I actually disagree with. Almost impossible for teams to have a break or barely even fit day-to-day necessities in. Needs to be changed because this is crazy. Yes, for some people. He then says after that, they really went from playing 9 matches in 2 months to 6 matches in 2 days. And yes, this is what literally every pro wanted. Every pro at the current time that was part of a starting roster was frustrated that there was so little Rocket League. Most of the pros agree that 2019 was the best year for Rocket League esports. You had 2 world championships and you also had 4 dream hacks that happened in between those windows. So if you weren't playing in the RLCS or there was a kind of extended break for a month, you got to go to a live event and play with the 32 best teams in the world and compete in a LAN environment. It was obviously ideal. The difficulty is what a lot of people are saying is they went from playing 2 league play matches in the old format a week to now playing anywhere up to 3, 4, sometimes 6 matches over the course of a day, maybe day and a half, which is a lot. And I do agree with that regard that there is a ton of matches being played right now for the RLCS between the fall, winter, and spring split, the 22 events that are going to happen throughout this entire season over the course of 9+ months. It is a, for lack of better phrasing, a metric ton amount of games. Anything is going to look like a big contrast when it comes to the amount of games being played if we compare it to the old league. But the format itself is a fantastic idea for Rocket League, but it's being dwindled upon for 2 reasons. One, I do agree it's unorganized and there is a little bit of poor planning on the regards to Psyonix. Communication has always been something they've struggled with, and a lot of people have expressed those concerns publicly. The other side of it is because of the pandemic, a lot of the things that would break up the mundane monotonous is the fact that these major events cannot be actual international major events. Due to the pandemic, we have to transition those into regionals. People play in proximity, and then we go from there, which really, I think, hinders what Rocket League esports and a circuit-based format is supposed to be. You are supposed to be having only select teams every single major that are finally handpicked due to the performances they've had throughout the regular season and giving them a chance to further emphasize that they are the best teams in the world. So when it does come down to the World Championship, it's not just the best teams from every single region being represented. It's the best teams in the world that are representing the World Championship. The reason why I am back and forth on this is because I obviously have a much different perspective. You have pros that range anywhere in age from 15 to 24, 25. Carmo, I think, was 27 or 28 until she took sub spot for 72 PC. But you're talking the varying age is what gives a different perspective to this. For someone like Scrub Killa, who put out this tweet, I'm confused at everyone complaining about the schedule. It's your job, right? And Psyonix can't just change everything for people with school, so tough luck. But then you also have people that talk about how difficult it is because they don't even have time to do schoolwork and everything else alongside it. Back when other pros like Garrett G and those that have been around for a really long time, they switched to online classing because they wanted to get stuff done as quickly as possible and to avoid other distractions. They wanted to make this their career. They wanted to make this their job. Garrett G's not the only player who's done it. There's multiple players in the Atlanta area that have also taken upon this and actually communicate family-wise to coordinate, like, how did you guys do this? How can we also do this for my person who's competing or my child that is playing in the RLCS. Part of the reason why I think that was so possible is because of the 2 seasons a year, and there was a little downtime, anywhere for 3 months at a time, where there's just really no Rocket League other than online tournaments that were set up by tournament organizers, which have pretty much gone away, actually. Psyonix, I think, needs to understand 2 things. Do they want to cater to the fact that they have a age restriction of 15, and that means that there is going to be a lot of younger kids, and need to have the planning and the foresight to understand that these kids are in school, they have other obligations, and they can't just play Rocket League all day, every single weekend, while also trying to manage their schools, their studies, and everything else that's going on? Or does Psyonix want to transition out of that? Do they also want to understand that in order for this game to grow, to continue to build and take into that next level, we may have to hinder some of those players or transition out of that, or we make the age restriction a little bit higher possibly, or we do like a grandfathered clause when we update it, or how do they want to do that? And it's difficult because I think they've set a precedent saying that because Scrub Killa was 13 and we only wanted to make him wait 2 years, we're going to fight for that 15-year-old age limit so he can come and play. And long term, it's actually causing some difficulties. I do think that the benefit of it being at 15 is there's a lot of very talented players, as we're seeing come through the scene, that have the ability to play much sooner than they would normally have to wait. Other games like League of Legends is usually like 17. Obviously, CSGO and other games, you have to be a little bit older because it is a mature rated game. So the difficulty, I think, for Psyonix is long-term, what do they want for their game? Do they want to still run into the complications for needing chaperones and parental figures and other variables that they wouldn't have to deal with if that age restriction was increased to 17, 18? I don't think that's going to be a thing because it is an E for everyone game, and it would feel kind of weird if only young adults, for lack of a better phrase, could enter and play in their tournaments when there's so much talent that is waiting. I remember a particular player in League of Legends named Shifter who also had this issue where they brought him in as part of an academy team, and he was a sub. He couldn't play on the starting roster, similar to how Beast Mode was picked up for Kansas City Pioneers. And then as soon as he turned 17, he got put on the starting roster because they knew he was very talented, but he had to sit and wait, focus on his studies, and wait for his opportunity. And in a day and age where instant gratification is a thing because we have the world's information in our pocket, that is something that is very much so missing from younger generations. This is a big generalization. This is not me attacking anybody, but younger generations have a hard time being patient because they haven't had to be. The way that life has adapted is we are allowed to get certain things very, very quickly, whether it be ordering things online and having them flown by a drone to your doorstep within 30 minutes, depending on where you live, to if I want to know information, if I want something, I open up my phone, click some buttons, and I have it. I guess back to the original point is, does Psyonix want to start to transition into that older generation to get rid of some of these issues with labor laws and everything else, chaperones and needing all these extra variables? Or do they want to understand that that is always going to be a hindrance to some degree and they need to accommodate? So let's go back to the original issue that apparently Jack brings up. He's saying there's 22 days that they are fitting in to the grid, regionals, and everything else when it comes to the spring split. You're talking 3 regional events and 6 days if you make it into the playoffs for the grid. That is a lot of games. That is a lot of matches. That is a lot to expect, while also trying to balance big projects for school and trying to get good grades so you can graduate, which Psyonix has always talked about. They want to support their players and make sure that their players are able to prioritize education as they should. Esports aren't going to be around forever. This game may not be around forever. And because of that, you need to have some sort of education to make sure in the future you have something to go back to. The difficulty is there are some pros like Scrub Killa who do have the ability to dedicate to this game full time. And this is honestly what they want. They understand it's a job and they're getting paid an exorbitant amount of money from an organization to treat it as such. Play it full time and then some. Practice, scrim, try your damnedest, because results are what matters. Nothing else in an esport matters other than results. You can have a good time, you can build camaraderie, there can be good content around it, but for organizations, the number one thing is success, is getting wins, winning trophies, being on the front of the big moment, because that then carries over to them. So there is a lot of complication, a lot of difficulty, and I do understand both sides. Is obviously if you're a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, in apparently Jack's case, it is very difficult to try to balance both school life and the amount of workload that is coming from scrims, practices, playing in events, getting ready for this and that. And if you're even worse, a team that hasn't qualified automatically, you have to play in the open qualifier days, the closed qualifier days, and you still have yet to make it to the main event. At the same time, for Psyonix, is that really their fault? Is it their problem if you are not one of the higher performing teams. They need to make things as ideal as possible for the top echelon so the people that are there are happy with the situation. And yes, there is going to be some unfair advantages. It is always going to favor the people at the top because those are the people you need to make the most happy. And that's kind of a harsh reality of life, is sometimes when you're the common denominator, life is unfair. And it's a hard reality to accept, especially if you're a younger kid. And it's unfortunate that some of these kids have never really felt that because their only job so far has been playing in video games. And that's not me degrading it. I would be super envious if I had the ability to make a living playing a video game, because it is a form of entertainment and entertainment sells. Tigray in apparently Jack's tweet summarizes it quite well. It says the schedule is just crazy. People who have to play in open qualifiers barely have any days off. For example, German Amigos from last week's Monday have to play the grid qualifier for 3 days. They then play the RLCS qualifiers for 3 days. They then play in the grid for 2 more days after that, which is 6 series. And then they have 1 day off and then 4 days of regional activity until they do the grid again. If I take this from like outside of esports, I'm a full-time employee at a company. You're talking from Monday, they play 3 days. So that's 3 days of work in a row. They then play qualifiers, which is 6 days of work in a row. They then play grid 2 more days. So that's 8 days in a row. And then they get a day off. You're working 8 days in a row without a day off. Man, I've worked 40 plus days in a row without a day off, depending on the job. But it was also a full-time job when I was 18 plus, not when I was in high school. In labor law state, you can only work 3 hours a day tops. So there is some very interesting things that esports does allow to get away with, where labor laws would normally say, no, this person is too young. You cannot do that. People understand esports has only been around for about 2 decades. It's very, very new. There's a lot of things and a lot of wiggle room that kind of teeter on it's kind of unethical kind of line. And it's something that I think a lot of growing pains are going to create for a lot of different companies. And Psyonix is no different. Overall, my opinion goes both sides. I do agree with both sides of the argument, depending on what perspective you're taking, the whole living your life in someone else's shoes. If I'm apparently Jack, I'm a 17-year-old kid, I want to have a job part-time. Rocket League cannot be a part-time commitment right now if you want to be successful. You have seen other pros where they have a full-time job and Rocket League on top of that, but they're not in school. And it's that balancing act, and time management is a very big skill and a very big asset to learn as early as possible. And hopefully some of these kids with their management teams on their organizations can help them with this. Support staff is becoming more and more important than it ever has. On the other side of it, if you're a Scrub Killa circumstance, you are the 0.001% in your profession. You are the best of the best out of millions of players that play this game. You are one of 30, 40, 50, 60, less than 100 people that get to do it and earn a livable wage doing it. So when he says, I don't understand, I'm confused, it's your job, sit down, shut up, however you want to phrase it, I can also understand that perspective as someone that also, works really hard to get where they are. And even though I work well over 100 hours a week, it's what I have to do to make ends meet. It's something that I don't have a choice in. So I understand both sides of it. I understand where both people are having a perspective on it. But ultimately, I think it comes down to, again, Psyonix. How do they want this game to transition? Do they want to still cater and have that younger age restriction? Or do they want to transition to older and maybe get rid of some of these other things? And how do they want to evolve as an esport moving forward? But something that cannot be ignored is that you are scheduling so many matches. As Tigray said in this tweet, grid qualifiers, RLCS qualifiers, grid 2 days, and then also a regional, and then the grid again in 22 days when you have a full month to do the broadcast. And the reason why it's all pushed together is because for the majors, they want to show every single individual region on the main broadcast. Every single broadcast in the month of April, May is going to have their own individual weekend, just like they did for the winter majors. It's going to be SAM, and then OCE, and then North America, and then Europe, or whatever order they go with. And the only broadcast that can happen on those select days, on Saturday, Sunday, is that regional. So there's no overlap. And the difficulty is you've set a precedent that certain matches happen on certain days. Regionals and big events are on the weekends because that's when the most eyes can watch, because most people work a Monday through Friday thing, and then Saturday, Sunday, they can watch the broadcast. Which is kind of how it's always been for big events, as well as international and traditional sports. Kind of how it goes. So do you give the players a little bit more breathing room because you need to accommodate to that younger age and schedule some of these matches on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Or do you continue to smush it all together and you get the reaction of something like apparently Jack, which quite honestly is justified? These are the types of questions that I hope Psyonix is asking themselves. These are the types of things that I hope moving forward that don't get overlooked, because it does make a big deal about how the esport is received, and it also makes a big deal on how the competitive integrity and the whole fairness of things is going to be handled when you are trying to cater to a younger overall player base. I'm curious on what you guys think about the topic. Obviously, this has been kind of all over the place trying to piece things together. There's a lot of different tweets from a lot of different people I did not get into, but if you guys would like to look at those, you can check out those in the description down below with links to both tweets, full threads, all the replies, and there is a lot of them. That is going to wrap it up for this video. I am Lawler, your inside source for all things Rocket League. I'm always curious on what you guys have to say. Leave them in the comments down below. And while you're down there, if you enjoy the content, give it a thumbs up, as well as make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.